Hi everyone, I'm Wayne Guthrie. I'm a creative director and advisor to Studio Everywhere. Jason and David have bravely given me the position on the bridge to have this conversation today, and I'm very excited about it because I get to talk to one of my favourite people that I've had the pleasure of collaborating with for a while now. A very experienced marketer and brand leader, Zarina Stanford, who is currently at Bazaarvoice, social platform, and has come to that via an incredible journey through IBM, SAP, Syniti, and Rackspace, where we crossed over. So, Zarina, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to Insights Everywhere. And
Well, thank you, Wayne.
introduce yourself.
Well, Wayne, first of all, I still remember when we first met somewhere in Shoreditch so many years ago, and it was an amazing gathering. And thank you for allowing us to use your studio and your space at the time as well, too. And that was quite an experience in terms of transforming an entire company and brand in less than 10 weeks. That's what we did. So fast forward, I'm here as CMO at Bazaarvoice. As you mentioned, the social platform. We're really, really proud to have been a 20-year-old company, really to champion the individual, particularly consumers' voice, as it relates to brands and retailers and their respective products. And what I call, in layman's term, word of mouth marketing. As CMO of Bazaarvoice, I am responsible for product marketing, for brand, for demand, as well as efficacy. So it's all of the above. And one thing, as you know about me, is that I actually, if I have a dream, I would dream to call myself a chief growth officer because everything that we do is about growth, whether it is, customer trust or consumer trust, or market share or share voice, and absolutely for demand for conversion to purchase and loyalty and the likes. So thank you for having me.
It's great. I was thinking about, your journey in this business. It's quite a unique perspective because your whole career has coincided with this crazy trip that the world has been on, where we've gone from a largely analog world, of broadcast media, where media plans were pretty simple things, relatively speaking. And you've seen that go through digital, that transition from digital into, mobile, and then social, dominating that space. And now here we are sort of staring into the bright lights, if you like, of AI and the possibilities that come with that. So I think you're uniquely positioned really to give an interesting point of view on where we're going, where, if you like, social first marketing is going, where we are first, and where it might be heading really.
Yeah. So if I could, and allow me to widen the spectrum, I'd like to really comment on the overall business and technology landscape, whether or not it relates to marketing. Because I think this transformation that we're talking about that you just queued up on is one that each and every one of us around the world is experiencing. And what is exciting to me in that very, very, very moment as we speak now is that, as you know, as we've talked about before, is a transformation that is owned and driven and absolutely championing by every single citizen on earth. So that means 8 billion plus people, that each and every one of us, in how we shop, how we behave, how we communicate, and how we find our watering holes, so to speak, and how we even talk to our friends and families, let alone for businesses, are all based on this very quasi one-to-one communication, but in a massive scale. So that, if I may just drop into, that's where we are today, right? You think about all the social platforms, whether it is for, friendly communication started so many years ago on Facebook, and now, is Twitch, is TikTok, is YouTube, because the way we communicate is no longer just in the old days we do this, but I feel like people don't do this really anymore. They just get on a screen, usually is one of the little bitty tiny screens, and just go. And the purpose of how we use these and what we communicate with isn't just about checking in on what's today's vibe, but what's up, Wayne. It's actually also to share what we think about a particular business, what we feel about a particular product, and what we actually believe that is something that we need to share. So from all spectrums. With that onset, I wanted to bring it now so many years ago. I'm probably going to pick up from my IBM days. We talked about e-business heavily at the time,
Mm.
meaning that businesses are no longer just knocking on the door and having face-to-face meetings and not having just the normal in-store kind of transaction. We were talking about through this whole used to be called internet, but that's like kind of data term now. Through cyberspace, we connect and transact.
Mm.
And we at that time, this is back in the 90s, I mean, and the early 2000, primarily started with that concept. At the time, we were talking about digital transformation. And digital transformation, as in exactly what you said, right? We used to do things in a manual, analog way. And then all of a sudden, because of speed, because of technology, because of everything else, we could be almost anywhere. And I'm going to give a plug to, I mean, when David and Jason created the company Studio Everywhere, I just love the name of it. It is everywhere. I mean, every moment, everywhere, right? And if I fast forward into my SAP days, is really the whole, the CRM, the whole customer relations management, all really on a digital form factor. And along the way, we talk about infrastructures and we talk about data, which is where I did when I was at Rackspace and with Syniti. And now, 3 years ago, I joined Bazaarvoice, and why it excites me every day. I'm going to go on record. I feel like I'm on a mission and not just really doing a function and not just working, because the power of each of us as individuals is profound.
Mm.
Recently, we teamed up with BBC.com StoryWorks as well as with Consumers International, really showcasing how the whole industry from a commerce and a retail perspective has changed and how brands has to really relegate control to the consumers who are actually controlling the brand narrative and the product narrative,
Yeah.
because
I
that's
mean,
how they think, that's what they feel.
yeah, that point is really interesting, I think, and an interesting one to discuss in slightly more detail because I think, and I don't know whether some of the businesses you're working with or the brands you've met who are perhaps more on top of this aren't really viewing it as ceding control to the audience, but more about recognizing that that influence and that exists, and that's part of the reality now.
Yes.
That's the new marketplace, which is less just dominated by broadcast media. It's not about that only anymore, but that there is that influence and that presence, if you like, within the marketplace that your customers have, and that it necessarily is a part of whatever your story is now. So really, are they embracing it more, not just positively, but embracing it as a new form of energy that they can access to benefit their business?
Yeah, I love how you just framed that. It's a new form of energy, it's a new form of infusion, if you will, right? Because here in our business, I mean, for anyone who is in the marketing space and in the sales space, we all know the criticality of content.
Yeah.
Content has to be relevant, has to be at the right time, and has to be current, and has to be feeling like it's personalized. Because
Mm.
we still like to talk one on one. And it's interesting that I think as individual shoppers ourselves and as consumers ourselves, we really carry the most respected and the most relevant voice. And exactly to your point, many brands and retailers around the world many years ago had already harnessed the fact, wow, if our consumers can really be our best sellers and
Yeah.
our best advocates and our best champions, it's up to us as businesses to take advantage and to leverage that. And to underscore that, I think the really, really important part, though, as they do that and as businesses do that, is to make sure that number one is truly authentic.
Mm-hmm.
That is truly to be trusted.
Is it worth just for people that listening that might not know about Bazaarvoice, because that seems like a good point to sort of explain a little bit what it is that Bazaarvoice does within the marketplace, because you've arrived not just at another business in a CMO role, but as you said before, you're now in a business which in some ways is redefining the marketplace. It's redefining the opportunity for brands to communicate, or not even to communicate, they already have that down, to reframe how brands exist and brand presence, I suppose. If we accept that, all
Yeah,
marketing is really about establishing presence, relevant presence and meaningful presence in the marketplace, it seems to me that Bazaarvoice are helping to make that possible for brands. So it might just be good to hear a little bit about Bazaarvoice and the difference between the two roles for you, from being a CMO where you're really focused on communication, to now where you're pretty much focused on how you enable others to communicate and to commune.
That's a great point. So let me take the first part first. So Bazaarvoice is about a 19-year-old company that really started with the single premise by the co-founder to say that if the voice of fellow shoppers are, number one, very informative, and second, could truly help me make the decision of whether I should consider one product or another, or for that matter, even if I should buy one versus the other. That promise of the word of mouth marketing was how Bazaarvoice started. Pragmatically, at the time, it was heavily on text-based and star-based ratings and reviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all do that still today, 20 years later. We look at, if I'm going to buy something, I'm going to rent an Airbnb, or, if I want to, look at a particular apparel, I first do that. And in fact, we do a series of what we call the Shoppers Experience Index, where we ask thousands of consumers how they make decisions oftentimes. And that user-generated content, if you will, or for that matter, including also creator-generated content, is still the first thing that they would go look at. Whether it's for early discovery, or for that matter, right at the moment before they're about to buy. What are the people saying about it? And that is the foundation of Bazaarvoice. Today, we help with not just that baseline of showcasing and amplifying, as well as optimizing that organic content, partnering with brands, 10,000 plus brands and retailers around the world. We also have two distinctive communities, one of influencers, everyday shoppers just like you and me.
Mm-hmm.
But yet these people are very relevant and very savvy in terms of telling what they think about a particular product. But they're just everyday shoppers. Then there are this whole rise of the creator economy, content creators. Oftentimes, not all the times, oftentimes content creators are incented either by having gifted the product or having a compensation to kind of test something and then tell the world what they think, because they're very on brand, they're very savvy, and they also like the creative freedom and also being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put it all together, Bazaarvoice really help brands and retailers to harvest, source, as well as to distribute organic content from consumers, from influencers, and from creators as a part of their content supply chain, oftentimes complementing with branded content.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, because as you described that, it seems like a good idea now in the last few years. If you said, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could harness all of this energy that's existing out there? Brands, whether they know it or not, whether they like it or not, people are out there advocating for them or criticizing them or reviewing them, doing all that stuff. Wouldn't it be a good idea, perfectly logical, to harness that and to somehow utilize it? But to 19 or 20 years ago, when the business was formed, it was an incredibly visionary idea that was something worth building a business on. I find that kind of astonishing that Bazaarvoice has been going that long. And I can only imagine that the
Yeah,
conversations have gotten easier, hopefully, when you're saying to people, when you're basically having conversations to prospective customers. But on that, what are there any brands that you think are really leaning into the opportunity, who are tuned in to this new marketplace and the potential within it more than others, or perhaps categories or verticals that you think are standing out as leaders in this new way to behave?
yeah, that's a great question, and I would say, let me just give you the scale first.
Mm.
So more than 12,000 actual brands work with us as the Bazaarvoice network,
Wow.
and they fall into key categories, and I'll jump into that in just a moment. In addition to brands who are actually the manufacturers sometimes, or they are the representation of particular products, as an example, there are also retailers. Retailers and marketplaces is also another place that you and I as shoppers go hang and go figure out, hey, what's new, what's like, and so in that sense, there are absolutely, I would say they're not the only three, but I'm, just in the rules of three, I'm going to call out, first of all, the three categories that, in my opinion, have absolutely almost perfected the best means to optimize that trust and that availability from a content and the consumer's voice perspective. First and foremost, absolutely the beauty, health and beauty is one of the space that is absolutely the most. I mean, imagine, right? Any of you listening here, if you're in the TikTok generation or Facebook generation, it really is immaterial
Hmm.
that many of these brands are showcasing how actual normal everyday consumers are consuming and using their products. And the imagery or the video clip or wheel of someone using the product
Mm.
who kind of looks like you or who kind of looks like, us, has the most profound impact
Yeah.
for consideration and for purchase.
Live demonstration,
Health and
essentially.
beauty, by far, yeah, by far the best, because I think, and if I may, there's so many of them. You can literally name all of them, right? It could be all the way from L'Oreal to Elf to Revlon to Estee Lauder and all those, and even you know different categories, Charlotte Tilbury's, whatever, in that whole space. They all harness the voice of the consumer, and in fact, to that extent, that I would, I trust that she won't mind me calling it out. My colleague and friend and a CMO fellow, Osh, who is the CMO of Mesa, they have a number of beauty brands. I think she captured it the best and in the most succinct way, if I may. And she kind of says that the holy grail of marketing is brands don't have to do it because your consumers are doing it for you.
Yeah, back to your earlier point about many brands perhaps perceiving it as having to cede control to someone else. That insight actually demonstrates the exact opposite. That if you embrace it and embrace it in the right way, it not only adds an energy, a power, and an unprecedented authenticity to your brand because it's coming through your audience. It also, in a strange way, can take care of a lot of the heavy lifting I think that brands used to have to do through the line with their communications. It makes me wonder if there could be a renaissance in high level brand expression and presence because brands can concentrate more on that. It's just interesting to think if we accept that that's the new dynamic of how we create presence, brand presence, then what does the process now look like?
Yeah. I love that notion. If I may, I'm going to use a heavy duty but a very old used word, co-creation. I
Hmm.
think that is what it is. If I think about, I love to pick up your thought, right? If this is the creative process that we used to do, which in the past has been, as a brand, I'm going to write up everything about my brand. I'm going to do everything about my products. I'm going to do everything branded. And today, fast forward, communities are really driving what a brand's potential and huge potential mushrooming can be. I'll use the Elf example. Corey is a phenomenal leader driving their marketing. And you can see it in their results, and you can see it in how they present themselves. Number one is always about the communities, because the communities are the consumers who is actually telling them what they want, telling them how they want it, and telling them where they want it. It's the best way for not only creativity in terms of brand messaging and presence, is a phenomenal force to drive product development.
I saw a great podcast, similar conversation to this actually, with Elf's CMO Corey Maschiotto, I think it is. It was incredible. She made that point that essentially their audience is somewhat of a open and ongoing research resource, because they're constantly getting feedback, and that goes directly into new product development. I really got this sense from listening to her talk that they're really focused on this and are doing some really great stuff, and really experimenting as well, not being scared to try stuff out. Which, as you said, maybe in that vertical, it's a bit more accepted. It's a bit more that they're further down the road. It might be a little tough for different businesses at this point, and different, I guess. But I was really impressed with listening to her speak about that. She said, that they're almost at that stage where they can market at the speed of culture, because although that's kind of impossible since the internet, but what a great goal to have, right? To be trying to keep in step, at least in step, or potentially lead occasionally.
She's definitely my hero, and I think so many of us can all learn from that mindset.
Yeah.
And this whole broader reality of co-creation can help the world, can help businesses, and can help us consumers
Mm.
be more um, be more relevant and be more informed at the same time, right? And one dimension that we hadn't touched on that I would really like to kind of give a shout out to is that if you take that kind of model, consumers are on their device. I don't know if I'm an average one or not, at least 10 hours a day. You either holding or you do something with it. And that creation happens on a rapid by the second space. And if you think about, right, Studio Everywhere as an agency, you as the creative, and I as a traditional, back in my days as a traditional marketer, it would take us weeks, if not months, to create a profound piece and dribble on the others. And today, time is of the essence. I mean, things moves at a fraction of a second. Can we afford to wait that kind of time horizon when your consumers are waiting to figure out? So they don't go to you as a brand, they go to others. They go to TikTok, they go to social media, they go to, all that scale to the tune. Yeah, it's amazing. And just to give a scale to the audience in terms of how active we as consumers use and share and either consume, share, or reshare, what have you, or create for that matter. The Bazaarvoice network around the world is used by 3.2 billion shoppers on a monthly basis. That is humongous.
Yeah, it's pretty
It's
far out.
like insane. But those are the touch points
Yeah.
that as we shop, as we think about who we're going to give in this season's, the holiday season, starting to think about
Yeah.
gifting and what have you, that's where we do our research.
Yeah, that's totally far out. I think it kind of almost makes a slight mockery of the idea of walking into any planning session thinking about how do we consider social in this equation? Where is social? And even if you're saying put social first, I feel like when you rack up those kind of numbers and statistics, you think about it, it's almost, it exists at the center of everything now, rather than it's not an add-on, it's not a nice to have, it's not doing it to stay relevant, or because it really is something that exists at the center and is redefining, I think, the role of a brand in terms of where their comms begin and end, and the kind of community aspect takes over, it's a little bit, I suppose it's allowing brands at best to stop having to communicate, and they have an ability to commune with the audience and enjoy that as a sort of a, a joint process, I suppose. Those numbers are staggering.
Totally, the number, just because sheer volume, how many of us are on Earth, right, and how socially active, regardless of age, by the way. Remind me to share a couple of data points. But I wanted to go back to your point in terms of, if we think about this dynamics, that this is how we communicate one to one.
Mm,
And now it's giving brands a chance to talk one to one with individual consumers,
yeah,
not in the way that we're doing it right now as we speak, but the fact is that I, as a consumer, can actually be heard, and I could actually speak and express what I think directly to a manufacturer. That's very profound. I've struck back in so many years ago where we were saying, oh, well, let's do a focus group. Let's do this. And then you wait 6 months, 3 months to go find out what they think.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
very
No, I
different
think,
world. Is a total paradigm shift.
yeah, it's one big focus group out there, and it's not afraid to speak and
And they're
publishes results
organic.
within a
That's
minute.
the
Yeah,
beautiful part.
it's kind of strange in
It
that way. I
happens
think that
at all
it's
times.
there's less of a funnel involved now, and there's more of just a large map that, and as you navigate online, as many people are going to do this Christmas, we all start to navigate online to do our Christmas shopping. It's almost as though I have this image in my head of now that there's people to hold your hand, there's people to go shopping with. You're not doing it alone, you know. I love,
I love that. You're definitely not doing it alone. And before you even can touch on something, you already know so much about that
yeah,
product or so
yeah.
much about that brand. It's
Yeah, not to
profound.
mention, do you find that people also post purchase are doing that as well? They're staying involved. Have you got any data on that? So that it's almost to reaffirm the purchase in their own mind, they've made the right choice. Do people stay? They don't disconnect at point of purchase. In other words, they're still there, talking about it, looking at stuff, etc.
That's a great question. Absolutely, yes.
Wow.
So I'll give you two sets of data. First of all, in fact, we just released our annual Shopper Experience Index, and we were just showcasing that the last couple of weeks around the world on roadshows, and it's now available. First thing first, regardless of age group, whether it's Gen Z or baby boomers, so anyone who is adult enough to be responding to this survey has to be 18 years old and higher. And the eldest category or age group is 65 plus. Regardless of what age group they are, 1 out of 2 of us have actually purchased something on social media
Yeah.
on a monthly basis.
Wow.
It's just staggering. It's like, oh my God. So that's the purchasing part. Then I swing over to the from the very beginning, right? Who did they discover? How did they discover? Discovery of products, number one, happens on social search, on overall search/social. The second place that people go to discover is actually retailer websites and marketplaces.
Right.
The search is 32%, so 3 out of 10 of us. The retailer website and marketplace is 29%, another 3, so 6 out of 10 of us use some forms of social and online to discover. Then, to your point about loyalty, that in fact, slight fluctuations heavily in the Gen Z and the millennial space, they follow their favorite brands and product for that matter throughout the entire formerly called funnel, but the every touch point now. So to your exact point, is no longer, definitely not linear.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
not sure that you can even draw it out anymore. It's kind of like, it happens, and it's a web of how things are happening. And this is the part I love about it, is we as individuals and we as consumers has the choice. It's up to us now. It
Yeah.
wasn't being bombarded by TV ads, by media, by whatever, by all the one-way advertising. It's us, we can make that decision. That's powerful.
It's really interesting because with so much change, how do you find in terms of, because I know one of the things you do is a lot of mentoring, and that's something that you're great at and you love doing, investing time, which in my experience, it's becoming harder and harder to invest time in that where we should be as an industry doing as much as we can. How do you find this has changed the way that you do that? Because obviously you're getting younger people come into the business, and some of them are working for you, some of them are in adjacent businesses, and you're helping them out with advice. But how has that changed over just even the last 5 years, I think? Because when someone's asking you, hey, Zarina, what's this all about? It must be it's obviously a different question to ask now than it was 5 years ago. But how's that been for you?
Saying that too, a visual comes to mind. There are two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I think one, and I'm going to start with that, it just keep absolutely reminding me and in all those people in the conversation, the importance of learning and relearning. I have one of my absolute favorite moments of being mentored is with Neil Waters, who is with Egon Zender. And it's not officially a mentoring session, but the one thing he said, and I'm like, I am so being you, and I'm so you in that sense. And his comment was that when I'm 85, I'm still going to be learning, because the day when I stop learning, I shouldn't be living. So that to me is also how I live, learning, both from a personal and professional standpoint. The last 5 or 10 years, though, had drastically also punctuated and added one other aspect of it, which is relearning. I think, especially, I'm going to say it, right? Especially for those of us who have been working for so many years and so long. I mean, my team, most of them is probably half my age, but I love learning from them because they think differently, they have different mindsets, and they have different orientations. So that suggests to me that I have to continue to relearn. So this mentoring and reverse mentoring is so powerful. That's the two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I love
But
the idea of reverse mentoring, or that it's a two-way street. Which I think part of me thinks that good mentors, it's always been like that. But I think you're right that now more than ever, there's an opportunity to learn from people that are coming into the business, as well as imparting knowledge and experience. Because just for the fact that there's a lot of kids in the business now who haven't been through the transition of analog to digital even. They're literally, that is sort of foreign to them. Although that doesn't mean, I think, that they're obviously completely, they haven't experienced it. There's plenty of, I'm sure there are plenty of kids whose first listening to Taylor Swift was on a record, on vinyl,
yeah,
because they
exactly.
have an older brother or sister or whatever it is. But I think that's a really interesting point, that is a two-way street. And it makes it kind of exciting because that everyone has something to contribute.
Yeah, if I can think of it like a spiral, upward spiral, as we learn and as we share and imparting knowledge, as you talk about, I do think there's a huge value, and I would preach to experience and maturity and knowledge sharing is something that is critical. We
Mm.
we have to have the frame of reference, so to speak. But as I'm thinking about this upward spiral, that as we keep contributing to the wealth of knowledge and to the wealth of learning and relearning, it could only go up. I mean, it could only grow. And hence why I want to be a chief growth officer than anything else. Because I think we're here to grow just like plants, just like ourselves, and minds continue to grow and the
Well,
market continue to grow.
I think of all the places you've been, this gig at Bazaar Voice is the one most appropriate for that title, because it feels like I wasn't aware that you worked with so many customers. That's kind of crazy, but I guess it speaks volumes about the sort
Crazy.
of environment that is out there now. That is the reality that we exist in, and that demands a completely different way of working, albeit still with obviously fantastic ideas at the heart of it. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's really really fascinating.
It's really reassuring and powerful when part of what you do is to grow the business. But as you're growing the business, you're also changing and benefiting other businesses and the world at large. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's kind of it's an interesting question. That's almost a completely separate conversation to have, but it's sort of occurred to me as you've been talking that as well as this having a marketing context, in terms of brands and businesses, how they grow, the new environment does sort of raise obvious questions around what it means more broadly for society and the way that we relate to each other and communicate, how elections, for example, are conducted and all of that stuff. And it sort of makes me wonder whether a lot of the innovation, because I know that you guys are obviously creating processes, tools, products, all that kind of stuff. It does make me wonder whether or not there could down the line be a function or a purpose for those tools and processes that go beyond marketing. So, for example, could they be utilized by governments, by countries to manage the way that we now carry out so many other things in a social digital space? It's I think that could be an interesting question because we will have tested them through marketing, so we'll have a pretty good idea about how they work. Is that something you guys talk about at all?
Not in a business as usual way,
Mhm.
in the light of, especially from a government use perspective, right? If I could reverse that, citizenship is a different thing. If you think about from a citizen's perspective, and if I may now not constrain to only one country, but the whole world, the citizens of the world,
Mm.
I think this is where what is the current and future state of consumerism, of how we would communicate, how we would govern what is real and what is not, and what is to be trusted and what is not, and how we may envision new use cases that we hadn't even thought about today. I think is phenomenal. It's exciting. I mean,
Yeah,
that is why I think as a species and as groups of people around the world, that ability to keep innovating. And I know everybody talks about AI these days and machine learning and have you. We have to take advantage of those tools. Is for us to, because it is to enable what we can do as a human race. But I think that I'm being selfish and being overly pride probably as a human, is that I can't see other entities, living, organic or otherwise, to have the willpower and the ability to continue to learn and to continue to apply,
mm.
and with assistance from technology, being able to be inclusive and being able to bring it all together. So to your question, it only for us to imagine.
Yeah, it's quite an exciting thing. I think that indirectly, if we can untangle a lot of the challenges we face pragmatically through things like how businesses build themselves and relate to audiences, hopefully it can have a relevance beyond that. I think as we face inevitable ongoing challenges as a sort of society. But like I said, that's a great topic almost for another conversation. Yeah,
To
yeah.
bring us back to earth a little bit, though, I do think that, especially in today's world and today's economic climate and the business climate, businesses still has to find means to, number one, deliver value, and number two is to capitalize on that value. And for anyone who might be listening who happens to be a brand or somewhere along those lines, I would absolutely challenge to say is that, have you taken full advantage of the value of the voice of your own consumers? And that could actually be applied both to B2Cs as well as B2Bs. We can all learn from it.
I guess in the sense that those two things are converging a little bit, in terms of how we work with it with both.
Two thoughts. One is my own personal estimation, because I was in a meeting yesterday and I cannot remember how this came about, but it's related on this front. Is that how much is it B2B? If you were to draw a Venn diagram, what is the overlap of B2B and B2C marketing? I believe that when I was growing up, it was very much maybe like 5%, right? The two circles are like this. in today's world, because of all this digital and social amplifications and availability and scalability, I believe it is at least 50-50 intersecting. So
Yeah.
in that intersection, how could we learn from each other? It's on both sides. Would they continue to become one? No, because the principle 101 of marketing would suggest to say if the target audience is different, you need to do slightly things differently because of segmentation and what have you. But even many decision makers and influencers, if you will, for B2B, they
Hmm.
are themselves individuals also first, and they are themselves consumers first. So I do think that crossover is going to continue to increase. And remember when I first came here, one of the realization that I have is that we always talk about B2B and the B2B to C. I
Hmm.
happen to believe it's the reverse now. It's actually C to B and C to C. And if you're really smart, take advantage of that and become the C to B and B to C. In That's powerful.
It seems like that needs a song. I think
Oh, it.
that needs a
Let's start with the
song.
ABC.
I love that actually because it's interesting because I think having worked a lot in tech and you obviously have as well, seeing over the past few years tech industry events become more popular with consumers, like things like CES and Mobile World Congress that were
Absolutely.
pure sales events, pure for industry, which are now, they're covered online. All the kind of people who are techies who are into that stuff, they don't want to know the product when it's being released. They want to know what's going on in development. They want to be part of those conversations, and it's it's becoming measurably way bigger for people, and those lines have completely blurred. And I think it is
Yeah.
fascinating.
I think so too. And to kind of wrap it up, if we all do take advantage of it, brands could be more informed, consumers are more informed, and therefore you're beginning to really see the power of that collaboration and co-creation. Who knows what the next world will be?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Z, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're particularly busy at the moment, so it's been a lot of fun to chat and catch up. I'm sure there's a lot there for lots of different people to chew on.
Well,
And
thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. It's always a
no,
joy. I think we can talk forever.
great pleasure, great pleasure. And
Thank
we will
you.
talk again soon.